Hey KU fans, welcome back to KU Sports Extra with my man Benton Smith live in the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. We're going to talk some Kansas basketball. Late night last night, Kansas season ends with an 89-75 loss to Auburn. That was the score, right?
That sounds right.
Okay.
It
was 14.
Somehow it was only a 14-point game.
Yeah, it was 14 for sure. But by the time we got everything written, by the time we got out of the locker room, and by the time we got up for our 5 a.m. flight, no time for KU Sports Extra. They were tearing down the floor anyway. So here we are in Phoenix on our layover, talking to you, talking Kansas basketball. Benton, real quick about the game. Nobody really wants to hear about that, I'm sure. But
no, right.
It obviously was difficult from the jump, and KU was overmatched from the beginning. Speed, athleticism, and obviously when you combine those things and you put yourself at a disadvantage there already, and then they also shoot 60+% from the floor, you don't have much of a chance.
Yeah, I think it seemed like Auburn came out just locked in. I mean, they were faster, they were hitting their shots, and KU didn't have a counter, you know.
Right.
I think it was 7-2 pretty quick, and obviously the game's not over at that point, but if you don't adjust or step up your game, you end up getting just ran over, and that's what Auburn did. I mean, Auburn just kept going, and Auburn wasn't okay with like, okay, we're up 10. This is cool.
No,
they kept their foot on the gas and kept going, and KU was buried before halftime.
7-2, 15-5, 34-17, 40-20, 51-25. Those were the scores that sort of like red flagged it for me as the game was going on. I was like, whoa, this is tough.
How about 19-0 in fast break points?
Yeah.
Like before like the midway point of the first half.
Yeah, there were even 20 points scored.
Yeah.
They somehow pulled that off. But I thought that KJ Lawson after the game in the locker room brought up a really good point that I hadn't thought of, and it kind of speaks to what you're talking about. He said that game that Auburn almost lost to New Mexico State, came down to the very end, they almost blew it. He said that woke them up.
Yep,
That got those guys locked in, brought their attention back to we have to really focus, and obviously KU was the victim of that mentality. So, a tough ending for sure. I thought the second half was better. Everybody thinks that. Everybody that watched it, I don't know, I don't blame you if you didn't, but everybody that saw it realized KU was out there playing hard, playing for pride. That was really all it was about at that point. You didn't think there was going to be a 26-point comeback. The game was never in question, but they cut it to 14. They obviously got it to that final margin of 14, and that's what a lot of those guys in the locker room, teary-eyed, emotional locker room, that's what they talked about. At that point, it was just pride. You play for your program, you play for people that came before you. You don't want to get embarrassed, and in that way they saved face a little bit.
Yeah, the thing, obviously it was going to take something insane for them to come back in the second half and somehow make it a game or somehow win
something like 7 for 7 to start the second half.
I was going to say they were literally trading baskets with Auburn.
But yeah, I mean, if you come out and you make 7 in a row to start the half, you're like, hey, we'd probably cut that thing in half.
Except that you didn't get any stops.
You didn't get any stops, and it went from 26 to 25.
Yeah. So obviously defense was an issue the entire night, and I don't know. To me, the inexperience showed up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Auburn looked like a team that had lost by 30 a year ago in the second round and hated how that felt, and was kind of hell-bent on getting to the Sweet 16, especially after they survived the New Mexico State game a couple days earlier. A lot of those guys came to Auburn to make a name for that program with Bruce Pearl, so this was their big moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Now they've got a chance to do even more next weekend in Kansas City.
It'll be fun to watch. To that point, sort of, Kansas is in those shoes now. Guys like Ochai, Devon Dotson, those younger guys, you really got the sense in the locker room from them that, hey, this isn't okay, and we've got to work, we've got to put some time in. I think they understood the reality that they were young, that this was their first shot at it, and that these things happen sometimes, but you did get the sense that it wasn't okay, and it wasn't sitting well with them. Beyond just the tears and the emotion, it was about how can we do something about this? How can we move forward with the idea of not ever having to deal with this again? And it'll be interesting because the roster is unknown. I mean, at this point, you've got a bunch of guys that could leave for a bunch of reasons. Diedrich being one of them, Udoka Azubuike, Quentin Grimes. Who else is on there? Silvio, we don't know what his status will be. KJ Lawson, don't know. We talked to these guys about that, and we'll have plenty of stuff on KUsports.com in the coming weeks, kind of about that, and days even. But it's interesting. What do you make of this team moving forward? A young group that, if they stay together, will benefit from this and can get something out of it. But if they don't, and if it changes, that's different.
Yeah, it's so difficult to gauge just because we don't have like the obvious answers of like, okay, of course Dietrich Lawson's coming back, of course Quentin Grimes is coming back, which, I mean,
you're saying we don't know that.
Yeah, we don't know that. Yeah.
Don't want anybody to misread it.
Right. So like in a typical season, you would be like, these guys didn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. They're not going to be lottery picks. Of course they're coming back.
Right.
Well, that's not the way college basketball works anymore. I mean,
nor was this a typical season.
Yeah. But I mean, like, we saw that with Malik Newman last year. He wasn't going to be a lottery pick, but that was his plan. He wanted to play at KU for a year and then move on to become a professional. So that's what guys are doing now.
Yeah.
It's hard to blame them. You go make money playing basketball. Good for them if they can make it happen. But that just leaves a lot of question marks. I mean, we know Devon Dotson should be back.
Right.
We know Ochai should be back. Mitch isn't going anywhere. But
David McCormick's
not going anywhere. But everybody else from the rotation, I mean, we really don't know. Less than 24 hours after the season ends. So I just feel like Devon Dotson obviously took it really hard.
Yeah.
So did Dietrich. So did Mitch. Those guys cared about this team and cared about putting a good product on the floor, and they were extremely disappointed, not only that their season ended, but how it looked for a lot of that game.
Yeah, good point. Marcus Garrett's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I almost forgot about him. Yeah. He threw us for a loop by not being there on Friday.
Yeah, right.
But he did, obviously he played, and what do you think? He looked a little bit slower than usual?
A little bit. I thought so. That's probably fair. The sickness, whatever he had, maybe dialed him down 10% or something. He didn't look like the lockdown defender that he could be, but hey, that might have been Auburn too.
Yeah,
I mean,
no kidding.
That's a tough challenge. I thought Devon Dotson's ankle looked fine. He played start to finish in this season like one of the baddest dudes in college basketball. And the incredible thing is he's only going to get better. So that's a nice piece to have coming back. A leader, a toughness example kind of guy. I feel like Ochai's the same thing. He's going to be that guy. He'll transform into that very quickly. It'll be interesting though. I mean, we'll have plenty of time later for sort of predicting and guessing what's going to happen. But yeah, it's a tough end to a tough season. There's no doubt about it. That was one of the more emotional locker rooms that I've seen, and I'm sure part of it was just the release of this roller coaster ride and this tough season on and off the court. Those guys fought so hard to just hold it together the best they could. They didn't always do that, but they did better than a lot of guys would, I think, and got a 4 seed, got to this point. I think they believed they had a run in them, and so I think once it came sort of crashing down like that, the emotion was, this sucks, this is hard, and it's always hard. They always hate losing, but this had a different feel. It's one of the more emotional ones, even more than last year's Villanova loss. That one people were in a daze a little bit, but also, look, they made the run. They got to the Final Four. This one felt like, I don't know if embarrassment's it, but a little bit. Like Mitch Lightfoot flat out said, this doesn't happen here. This isn't acceptable. So that kind of mentality was rampant throughout the locker room, and just a tough night. Like I said, best way I can put it, tough ending to a tough season.
Yeah, they wanted to accomplish more, and they didn't come close to competing with an Auburn team that not a lot of people talk about nationally. So I think, like you mentioned, just like so much of this season was adjusting to losing a guy or someone getting injured,
finding a new lineup.
Yeah, so I don't know. It just all those things catch up with you eventually. They were inexperienced. Only Mitch and Marcus Garrett had played in an NCAA tournament before this weekend. So I just think like all the issues that we saw pop up in those road losses throughout the year, we kind of saw them magnified even more against Auburn.
Yeah, good point. It'll be really interesting to see what happens from here. We're going to be covering the heck out of it. Of course, there's some recruiting to be done too. They are going to lose some of those guys, and Self's going to have to replace them. So Matt Hurt, still on the board, still a big target for Kansas. A few other guys that that are on that upper echelon, but beyond that, you're going to have to plug in some other pieces too. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do from here. And you know, we'll be covering it every step of the way for sure. It ends fast when it ends, but Benton's got football.
Spring football.
There you go. So we'll have that, obviously, and then of course KU basketball is a 365 days a year thing. So we'll track all of the stuff that's happening in recruiting with the roster and just whatever else they've got going on. It's going to be interesting from here. In some ways, the end of the season almost gets more interesting than part of this season was, because you kind of knew this team was I don't know, lacking in some ways, and you kind of knew what that meant. You knew they couldn't win on the road. You knew they were going to have trouble matching up certain places in certain ways, and that's what happened. KU loses 89-75 to Auburn in the second round of the NCAA tournament in Salt Lake City, and that's the end. They finished 26-10, a pretty good year. Not one many of them will want to remember too fondly, though. So for Benton Smith, I'm Matt Tate. We'll see you guys out at football, and we'll talk to you again soon on some kind of KU Sports Extra basketball edition. Thanks for checking it out all year, and thanks for sticking with us. KUsports.com will have all you need for all kinds of off-season stuff. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.